So let's talk about 130K Bitcoin, food shortages, and unemployment, the final Saturn Uranus square. I'll be coming out with a video next and soon that will cover the future of America, the biggest transits of the decade, how our financial system actually works, why our financial system is transforming into something completely new, has a lot to do with the conjunctions last year, and how all of that ties into my financial thesis for the decade and how we can kind of navigate that. So let's get started. And let's start with my prediction on things tightening up as of September 15th in my last video. So I hope you've been stocking up your pantry and gathering your essentials. You may have noticed the shelves are pretty empty again, right? And this is going to get progressively worse as we get closer to December 28th, and will continue this way into the end of February. Shortly after that video came out, the US President Biden announced a mandate for all federal workers to get vaxxed against the virus. Many companies in the US also made similar decisions around the 15th of September. It's also interesting that many corporations and the US government, I believe as well, are requiring this mandate to be met by the end of December, which is when the final Saturn-Uranus square will be taking place. So it's always interesting to see how that timing works out. We have more unemployed people than ever, and the mandates will push even more people out of the workplace, which in the end results in less goods and services for everybody, right? If you haven't noticed, everyone everywhere is hiring, right? And so although the government may be able to print money for their friends and for those that follow the rules that the government is issuing or that authority is issuing, but what good is that paper money without the goods and services to buy it with? Right? Without the chefs to cook that meal, without the pilots to fly those planes, without Aquarius, without the collective, without human beings, without humanity. Now let's talk about the third and final transit of Saturn and Uranus squaring each other this year, right? So Saturn being the old, the reliable, and the established. Uranus being the revolutionary, the new, and untested, right? You could say this channel started when the first square took place. What was happening then? Claims of election fraud, people storming the White House, new medicines were being made available for emergency use. Wall Street and Robinhood almost lost a shit ton of money due to a bunch of Redditors, a bunch of people, the regular common person. But they shut down the system so that couldn't happen. And coincidentally, on the other side of things, you had Bitcoin doubling in price when Elon Musk announced that Tesla is holding Bitcoin on their balance sheets and that you can buy a car with Bitcoin. So clearly there seems to be this energy of big tech versus old business, liberal versus Republican, old versus new, right? Saturn being the old, reliable, and established, Uranus being the revolutionary, the new, and the untested. Now, this summer was pretty nice, because we had Jupiter in Pisces. Do you remember the optimism everyone had? Other than people who are into astrology, pretty much everyone thought the whole virus thing was over. Do you remember that? Jupiter's been back in Aquarius since cases started rising again, and the panic returned with the new variant. But the good news is that Jupiter will return back into Pisces for all of next year, which we're going to need, because next year is when we really have to start facing the music. Right, and facing the reality of what happens when essentially the entire world has been incentivized for multiple reasons to stay at home and not work, and how all the financial shenanigans that took place in order for that to happen is going to cause inevitable price increases in everything until the entire system implodes on itself. I'll dive more into that topic in another video, like I mentioned, but Jupiter in Pisces is why the summer was filled with hope and reconnection with other people. Right? We thought we were past things, right? Jupiter and Pisces made that feeling and that energy possible. While that was happening, the second square between Saturn and Uranus hit starting on the 14th of June. And so what was that? That second square was a second chance. It was a time period to look at what was holding us back. And I hope that the Jupiter and Pisces energy while that square was taking place brought you some opportunities in your life that allowed you to actually take that second chance. A lot of people got new jobs or moved somewhere new when this was taking place. The square aspect brought a lot of pressure to it. So these adjustments weren't necessarily easy, but I trust that for most of you, the effort was worth it when it came to the opportunities that were presented to you. And the third and final Saturn square Uranus transit will hit on December 28th, and we'll feel the effects of that until, like I mentioned, the end of February next year, 2022. And the third square is not going to be so gentle. The weather, once again, is probably going to be terrible. These are two cold and dry planets, and this will be wintertime in the northern hemisphere, so there will probably be snow in Texas and all the same weird weather events happening in the middle of June, but they'll be happening in the middle of winter. There'll probably be blackouts again, right? If you're in the southern hemisphere, you might experience extremes of warm, hot weather, right? I know this summer where I live, we experienced hail in June. Crazy, makes no sense, but that's Uranus for you, unpredictable. Don't be surprised in the northern hemisphere if between December of this year and February, if there are extreme drops in temperature, like way below -0 Fahrenheit or below -18 Celsius if you use Celsius, for degrees. Saturn in Aquarius means that the Aquarian aspect of life will experience the unexpected shocks from Uranus. Okay? So what you have to think about is, what house in your chart do you have the sign of Aquarius? That is where you're going to experience unexpected stuff getting shaken up. And you have Uranus and Taurus, so it's the Taurian aspect of life that's going to experience the grief and the limitation and the need to cut back and be as efficient as possible because it's being squared by Saturn. So in what house in your chart do you have the sign of Taurus? That's where you're going to experience pain in the ass, quite frankly. If you combine the two meanings as I described them, you can see how I got the title of the video. Taurus represents food and anything that we put into our mouth or the things that come out of our mouth, like the values, our speech. And Taurus represents material items and all of the earthly things that we need to survive and to support ourselves. Just like the second house. All of that is being revolutionized by Uranus. But right now it's being restricted by Saturn for the duration of this square. That means food shortages, at least until the end of February. Then you got Aquarius. Aquarius represents the collective, the group, the community. Saturn's there. So Saturn's got the group and the community feeling depressed and limited, and restricted. But Uranus, the energy of rebellion and innovation, is squaring that. It's fighting Saturn. So it's out in the street protesting. People have quit their jobs in record numbers never seen before. And like the video says, a single Bitcoin, which is now about 60K as of the 15th of October, will cost more than 6 figures by the end of December this year. Because, on the other hand, where you have Saturn also being restricted by Uranus, which means the things in the world that are old and outdated that refuse to change while the North Node has been in the sign of Gemini and while the South Node has been in the sign of Sagittarius for the past year and a half, the things that refuse to change will have to deal with the consequences once the square becomes exact. The American economy is due for its consequences. So there's going to be a fast, shocking disturbance and a change by Uranus, and then there's going to be some restriction by Saturn, and then there's going to be some blame. Saturn's going to blame Uranus, and Uranus is going to blame Saturn. This is what we saw with GameStop and Reddit and that whole thing. That's exactly what happened. We're going to see that sequence of events taking place again with a different event. Uranus is the planet of awakening, and Taurus is the sign of money. Bitcoin was created to awaken the world about money. And it's going to do so in a shocking, chaotic, unpredictably Uranian way, right? And that blame is going to get passed when we start to experience the effects of our traditional financial system being transformed and being redone and revamped. So it's going to be a wild ride. I'm not saying that the dollar is going to disappear. I'm saying that the entire system is going to be revolutionized. So here's what you do. Make sure you've got enough food, shelter, and power for the next few months. Hopefully you don't need it. Cyber attacks, those are going to ramp up heavy. Be very careful with passwords, financial data, all digital data, period. Saturn square Uranus talks about time and money. Do you need more time in your life? Or do you need more money? Think about what you've learned, your values, how that's come up for you this summer, and be prepared not to compromise on them as we get closer to the end of this year. And think about how you relate to the communities, Aquarius, in your life, and to the collective. Have you changed the way that you relate to your friends, your family, your coworkers, and the world in a way that serves both you and the groups that you are a part of? And lastly, you gotta be flexible. They'll probably start talking about aliens again or something crazy. You never really know what to expect when a hard aspect of Uranus is involved. So in any case, be well, one love,